So the topic or agenda for today's discussion with Anurag was something that is, I think, probably the most prevalent question that people ask us, and especially among young aspirants, is that, how do I tailor my profile to get into product management? How do I build my CV? What are the things I should keep in mind for my interviews? I'm not from a PM background. How do I go about increasing my chances of shortlists, etc. Hello, everyone who's joined us in, and for folks who will be seeing this later on. Just a brief introduction about myself and about Seekamentor, and then we'll move on with the agenda for today. So my name is Sahil. I am an alumnus of IIM Bangalore and a senior PM at Microsoft. I'm also the founder at Seekamentor. Seekamentor is a learning and mentorship platform. We've been providing PM-related learning programs such as courses and also mentorship programs. We also tie up with colleges to provide PM-specific placement training. And over the last 2 years, we've helped almost 1,000 odd students with our courses and almost 7,000 odd students through our mentorship programs, knowledge sessions, etc. And we also continuously host workshops, video podcasts with PM leaders like Anurag to get the right kind of knowledge, skill sets out there for our community so that they can learn and aspire to a PM role. So that's a brief about myself and about what we do at Seekamentor. If this is your first session with us, do go and check out our page on YouTube or LinkedIn, and you'll find many more such resources there. And for those who are joining us again, great to see you guys. So before I start off with the questions, thank you, Anurag, for making time and joining us for this session. It's great to have you on board and have you answered some of these questions that we've received from folks and also created. A brief about Anurag's illustrious PM journey. Anurag started off. He's a BTech. I think like most of us, he started working at Goldman and Nokia after his BTech before he started pursuing his PGP at ISB. And after ISB, he transitioned into PM role at MMT, and then he joined Easy to Book, InMobi, Hotstar, and now he's back as the second innings at MakeMyTrip as the director of product. And all of the different responsibilities and areas that he's worked on is a testament of how diverse Anurag's experience is. So Anurag, welcome on board, and please feel free to add anything that I might have missed in your introduction.
Thank you, Sahil. Thank you so much for that extensive introduction, and happy to be here. Great to be talking to you on this forum.
Great. So without further ado, then I'll just start off with some of the questions that we have planned for today. So first question, Anurag, for you, I have is that, could you walk us through your journey to becoming a product leader? Like, you started like everyone else, you started with more of a hands-on role, and then you've grown working across these diverse organizations. So how has your journey been, and what inspired you, since you did not begin your career in the product domain directly in product management, you transitioned into it after your B school. So what inspired you to choose this field?
So Sahil, yeah, that's probably something that has been very, very sort of, my journey has been quite different from others, even though it seems like I did that standard BTech, then went to an B school, and then eventually ended up in product. So what happened in my case was I actually worked, like you said, right, at Nokia before going to ISB, right? And I had seen that role, at least the product role at Nokia, they used to call it a product owner, not a product manager. I'd seen that role close up front prior to going to ISB. And unlike the flavor of the product role that you see today, right? That role was very much centered around sort of managing the feature backlog, right? Managing the releases, right? Managing the sprint plans, right? Getting the estimates done and making sure that everything was like on track, right? So it was more of a, I would say maybe the right version of it today is the program management role, right? And
Right.
Back then in like 2011, 2012, when I was going to ISB, and before that, when I was working at Nokia back then in 29 to 10 time frame, that's the only flavor of product management I knew, right? Unfortunately, that's what my world vision of product management was, right? So going into the B school program, I wasn't really sure whether I wanted to kind of pursue that journey, right? So going into B school, I was like, yes, maybe with a background in development, right? And I've spent a fair bit of time in the tech industry at pretty good names. Maybe that's the probably a natural sort of post MBA outcome, but it wasn't an outcome I was keen on, honestly. So just by sheer luck, what happened post ISB, I ended up at MakeMyTrip. And while I did interview for a product role, it didn't work out back then for me. And what they felt that based on my skills, I was probably more suited for an analytics slash digital marketing role, right? And that had to do with the fact that I had a different sort of vision of product management in my mind, right? So obviously that was coming out in the interviews, right? I thankfully I went into MakeMyTrip with a very open mind. I saw business being done at internet scale. MakeMyTrip is one of those first wave of internet companies in India. I got to see product managers up and close within the organization, right? And even in digital marketing, you kind of touch upon the same tenets, right? You think about user centricity, what kind of ads would work well for your user, right? You are very data driven. Look at CTR rates. You look at what the user is doing post clicking on those ads, right? Do you sort of adopt this philosophy of rapid experimentation, right? Uh, so I kind of got some of those skills on the job, right? And I was watching the PMs from the sidelines, and at that point of time, it was absolutely crystal clear to me that this is the role I want to do. I actually want to do a consumer internet product role. I'm not looking to be a program manager or like a release manager of sorts, right? That was my sort of aha moment. That was the moment when I realized that this is exactly what I was supposed to do after getting my MBA. And thankfully, yeah, after spending a year in the online marketing role, I managed that transition internally within MakeMyTrip into a product role, right? And that's sort of how I kind of ended up in this, right? And those are still early days, right? So I ended up in the product role in 2013. I think people didn't back then in 2013, people didn't even know what a product management manager does, right? There were hardly a very few companies, right? Maybe Flipkart came on ISB campus for a product role, right? It was one single solitary role for 570 of us, right? Maybe like 200 of them were probably interested in that role, right? One product role from Flipkart, one product role from Amazon, and a couple of product roles from MakeMyTrip. That was the entire sort of product management sort of recruiting circle back then in
Yeah.
2012, right? So yeah, so that's how I ended up here. Now the journey to a product leader or a senior role in the product industry has been a conscious outcome of decisions that I've made, right? So thankfully, getting into the product role, I understood that what I really need to do is basically place bets on myself, right? If I look at my career as a product, right, and look at what kind of outcomes I can drive on this, one thing that is very, very clear to me as a product manager is one key job is to identify and spot trends before they become mainstream, right? Once you sort of get onto that bandwagon before anyone else does, right? You basically log in crucial hours, crucial weeks, crucial months, years before anyone else does, right? You become an expert in that area before that area becomes mainstream, right? And that's true about launching products also, right? You spot an opportunity, you look at a trend, right? And you get into this before other companies do that, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the core tenets of being a product manager, and I apply that same lens to my career, right? So when I got into product management within MakeMyTrip, I was given multiple choices, right? And I pushed and forced myself into a mobile product management role, which was again a very small team back then, right? Out of the 15, 20 odd PMs working on products within the company, there were only 3 PMs who were working on mobile products, right? Mobile was still not that big, right? But I had understood, and thankfully I had some good friends, right, who had made me understand that mobile is going to be the future for the next decade or so, right? And getting into mobile product management basically started unlocking all kinds of doors for me, right? Back then there were hardly any mobile PMs and companies with the versions of the apps and all, right? So uh, just getting into that domain just set me up for sort of a fast track sort of path, right, towards growth and then getting onto senior roles. The role I did at MakeMyTrip helped me sort of get into a role at InMobi at a senior level, right? So got into a senior product role back at InMobi, right? And what I did at InMobi within ad tech space, right? So after mobile, I decided that I wanted to get a flavor of the ad tech space, right? Because that again I feel is a foundational sort of plumbing of the internet. If you cannot monetize, that's one of the primary monetization models. If you cannot monetize, you cannot run a business, right? So
Yeah.
so I picked up ad tech, right, and that helped me sort of transition into again a sort of a jump into Hotstar, right, where obviously one of the key ways of monetization for an OTT platform is ads, right? So so I've been placing bets, right? So the goal has always been to kind of identify the next trend, place a bet on myself, right, that I can get into that industry, pick up those skills before anyone else, and that has become like the foundational sort of undercurrent for my growth towards a senior leadership role, right? And I've picked up those trends, delivered the goods, right, delivered certain products that have delivered revenue and impact for the company, and that kind of became sort of the peg on which I could sort of get myself to a director role and hopefully in the future to more senior roles in the industry.
Got it. So very interesting thing that you mentioned, right? Like in PM, PM is not really a very short-term game, right? Anything that we conceptualize or we produce, it has to be at least from a medium to long-term thing, because you don't realize the outcomes immediately. And you said that, you applied those same concepts to your career, that a few years down the line, what is the thing that will be prevalent? What is the thing that people will be working on? And then you sort of, back calculated. So that's very interesting. I'm sure, a lot of people will be able to relate on how they can implement this in their day to day. So so like, now you've seen, you've yourself, over the years, started in the product area, you've been a senior PM, grown through the hierarchy, and now you're at a director level. And I just want to understand that, how, like, for any PM, it is very difficult to prioritize between a lot of competing demands that come from stakeholders, executive, engineering teams, customers, etc. And I think it magnifies, as and when you grow into how has it, how has the prioritization process been? How difficult has it been for you to, manage these different kinds of competing stakeholders and goals that people have?
So I would be the first one to admit that I still feel it's still a very hard problem for me. Even though I spent so much time in the industry, it's still very, very hard. It's a hard problem. And the core reason why I think people don't realize what the fundamental root cause for that is, right? I think the fundamental root cause why this is a hard problem to solve is because the kind of asks that come from different stakeholders, right, are fundamentally based on certain different themes, right? You're kind of trading off one product idea versus another product idea, but those are not really like to like or apple to apple, right? So one idea might be let's focus on let me take the MakeMyTrip example, right? One of the ideas could be let's sort of fix all the friction around user flows on the post booking sort of flows, right? So let's say think about amendments, cancellations, tracking refunds after you have done a flight booking, right? And that obviously the benefit that it has is it improves customer retention, improves the NPS in the short term, right, and in the long term as well, right? And you have this idea, and then on the other idea, some other stakeholders coming in and says that why don't we build a flywheel on user generated content, right? And that becomes a long term moat, right? And hopefully it improves the final conversion and eventually leads to better customer satisfaction, so more attention. Now these two ideas are in very different sort of camps, right? It's very hard to kind of say that this idea is better than the other, right? And yet you are supposed to come up with like a stacked ranked list of 20 different things that you have in your prioritized backlog in a certain sequence. Whereas the truth is one of these things is probably for long-term sort of building moat in your business, right? When you build that flywheel of user-generated content versus the other stuff is probably around improving retention in the next 6 months, 12 months time frame, right?
Yeah.
And that is so hard to even explain to the stakeholders, right? It's just uh, like very, very hard to explain that these two things are very, very different from each other, and probably it makes sense to do both, right? And you are forcing me to do trade-off against these two themes, which ideally should be there in your roadmap, right? In some sense, I think both of them should coexist. So yeah, that's the core problem. It's not just a shortage of bandwidth issue. It's not just a shortage of how much effort a product manager can put in. It's just fundamentally a very different problem to solve, difficult problem to solve, right? So what I do at least typically is that I try to uh, my stakeholders or my leadership team, and thankfully working in Indian startups, right, in slightly smaller sort of organizations, has helped me with access to the stakeholders or the senior leaders of the organization directly, right? That's a conscious choice again that I've made, right, in my career. And what I do is, like, right at the beginning of the year, I at least outline certain themes, right, that as an organization we should invest into, right? And then kind of build some kind of structure, some kind of a scaffolding, right, for the product roadmap, right? And then say that, and then also kind of work out rough effort allocation, right? So let's say you say that, hey, you know what, for 30 to 40% of the effort will go on making incremental sort of funnel improvement so that the conversion keeps on increasing. Another maybe 30-40% will go on maybe new product launches, and here are certain core themes on which we want to launch new products. Maybe you want to drive engagement, maybe you want to drive retention. Maybe another 20% goes into, let's say, doing like really moonshot kind of bets, right? Really big bets, right? Things that are not going to fructify in, let's say, 6 months, 1 year time frame, but hopefully the flywheel starts working in, let's say, whatever year plus time frame, or maybe more, right? 18 months time frame. That's what I try and do. Having said that, the allocations and the themes would vary from organization to organization. Obviously, it also is a function of how much leeway you have with your leaders, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so ultimately, it's not like when I do that process, things are cast in stone. And when a stakeholder comes to me and says, "Why are we not doing it?" Uh, I I do sort of incorporate for the fact that, you know what, maybe things have changed or the macro context has changed, right? Or the situation says that maybe there's something that you need to pick up, right? For example, a classic B2B example would be a sales guy would come and say that my $1 million contract is stuck on this particular feature, right? And then
Yeah.
they try and figure out whether truly that's the ask that the customer needs or whether there's something else, right? And
Yeah.
then hope sort of either say that, you know what, I'm going to pick it up, or I am going to put it on the backlog, right? And hope, and I'll get to it in, let's say, next 3 months, 6 months, or whatever, right? And again, like having that clear communication with your stakeholders is key. And I'm not afraid of saying no to my stakeholders. I've done that quite a few times, and yeah, like making that trade-off very, very visible and clear to your stakeholders is very important. That if I do this, something else is going to get dropped, right? And that is something that we had outlined as a key priority for the organization at the beginning of the year, right? And that's how somehow you manage sort of this entire sort of balance between your product roadmap versus ask coming in from various different stakeholders versus revenue versus retention, right? All the kinds of trade-offs that you keep making on a dynamic basis.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think even for me personally, when I was new to the PM journey, making trade-offs was something that came very difficult to me because, we are, I think, wired to sort of, want all and do all. But when there are so many constraints coming in from all of these, where you have developers constraint, budget constraints, other constraints, it's a very nuanced skill that one PM has to learn, is to make trade-offs and also better communicate, as you said, to the stakeholders. So yeah. Anurag, you have, you've I'm sure you've been recruiting PMs from the industry for a while now, and the next set of questions are more focused towards uh, as PM aspirants, recruitment practices, etc. So this next question I have is that, what are the essential skills and qualities that you as a recruiter look for in a candidate, and how does this vary with the hierarchy of the candidature that you are recruiting for?
Right. So yeah, that's a great question. I think what I'm looking for in a candidate is basically passion and drive for product management, right? Like just that ability to take initiative, right? And and obviously, so let's talk about both phases, right? What I'm looking for in a resume versus what I'm looking for in an interview, right? So when I'm looking
Yeah.
at it, what I'm looking for is basically whether this guy actually looks like the kind of guy who takes initiative, right? Because product by definition is a very hard role, right? You have to push your ideas through, right? Let's say you have a great idea, but your audience might not be receptive to it. Your stakeholders might not be receptive to it, right? You have to keep coming up with maybe data points, maybe competitive research, maybe user research. You have to sort of keep building those artifacts and have that perseverance to push your idea through if you truly believe in it, right? And feel that that idea is going to deliver good impact. Once launched, will deliver good impact for the country, so for the company, right? So that is what I'm looking for. Does the guy have perseverance and does the guy have initiative, right? It might come through the various projects that you might done in your previous organization, right? The kind of product launches you did, or it might even be beyond work, right? You might have shown certain initiative in terms of maybe launching an indie app, right? You sort of work with no code builder tools and you launch something on the side, right? Because you feel passionate about that problem or something similar that you are doing, right? Sahil, you launch Seekamentor, right? So that's the kind of drive. At least I don't look at it at least personally, I look at it from a very positive lens that the guy is actually trying to do something beyond what he's doing at work, right? And kind of showing that initiative or drive to basically do something, right? So those are the kind of things I'm looking for. Obviously, I'm looking for the so-called what is the scale of problems that the candidate has solved, what kind of impact he has had at the organization, and then and did he pick a set of problems, right? I try and assess that did he pick a set of problems that truly made sense, right? So that's the kind of thing I'm looking for when I'm sort of screening a resume, right? Now, when it comes to the actual interview, I'm basically looking for three things. First thing I'm looking for is user-centered thinking, right? Be it a consumer product context or an enterprise product context, I think thing that I feel seems to be missing the most, and it's kind of maybe touting on something that seems very obvious, but it's very ironic and funny that when you sort of put a product design question in front of a candidate, right? Most of the candidates, even candidates who spend fair bit of time in the industry, actually struggle with it like crazy. And you just have to throw a slightly hard product design problem at the candidate to just see how they react, right? So for example, a very I'm spilling the beans here, but one of my favorite sort of comfort questions when I'm interviewing a candidate at MakeMyTrip is, so MakeMyTrip has been in the flights business for the last 20 years. What will you launch to improve the conversion of that funnel by, let's say, absolute 1 percentage points, right? I'll change the question according to how the candidate sort of responds, right? Now, given that most of the guys have been using MakeMyTrip for the longest time, right? And it's the dominant online travel player in the country, right? We have more than 50% market share of the online sort of travel market. And yet, you have used that product so many times, and yet you cannot come up with like one good credible idea, and you are interviewing with MakeMyTrip. It is like the stats so bad that it's not even funny, right? Like most of the PMs cannot come up with one good idea as to how they can improve, right? And the scenario is this, right? Most of the low-hanging fruits are gone. You have been optimizing this funnel for the last 20 years. And yet to come up with better ideas, right? You have to keep improving that product. And people are not able to come up with good ideas, right? So I'm not going to get into how to answer that, but that is what I'm looking for. Are you able to solve problems like, right? The problem seems very simple as stated, but it's a hard problem, right? Because most of the obvious stuff is already done. Right. For example, another example, if I had to take a non-MakeMyTrip example, is just improve WhatsApp, right? And most of the people would talk about most of the ideas are not really based in user-centered thinking, right? So they'll talk about something like, okay, you could maybe thread the conversations a certain way, right? Or if you talk about maybe improve the side drawer a certain way, or right, maybe just rank the conversations, right? But those are not the kind of ideas that I'm looking for, right? I'm looking for is, what kind of user problems would you like to solve? Are you really thinking about the user? Are you really thinking about what WhatsApp's mission is, right? Are you really thinking about that is chat the only way of connecting one user to another? Maybe there are other ways, right? That's how they went into calls and then video calls and so on, right? Maybe there is another layer to it, right? So that is where I feel things like I'm able to screen at least like 85-90% PMs you will be able to screen just through a plain simple sort of product design sort of question. It's kind of surprising, right? The second thing I'm looking for, once you kind of pass that basic bar, what I'm looking for is product execution chops. All right. Okay, you might be an idea who can come up with good ideas on paper, but do you have the skills and perseverance to actually get this through and launch it, right? Now, a lot of people claim a lot of things on their resume. This is again an actual sort of scenario from an actual interview where someone I interviewed said that, you know what, I launched vernacular products at my organization, right? and you start going deep into it, right? So how did you go about it, right? What did you translate? What did you transliterate, right? How did you manage the sort of translation for third-party content, right? For example, in MakeMyTrip's context, let's say if I have to translate the content, a lot of that content is actually coming in from the airlines, right? How do you manage dynamic runtime sort of translation, right? How do you manage static versus dynamic content? How do you know that the translation that we're doing is actually working for the user, right? Should I call flights Viman or should I call flights written flights in Hindi, right? So and it's funny that I myself, that's the fun bit, right? But I'm able to think of such issues, and the guy who is claiming that he actually did this is no has no clue as to these are core issues in launching any vernacular product. And I have not launched it myself, right? I'm just doing a thought experiment in my mind as to what things. So that tells you that that's like a giveaway signal that you probably just project managed it. You didn't really did the product part of it, right? So that's what I'm looking for, right? Product execution chops at senior level. Just throw in a product strategy question, right? A slightly hard question where you ask the candidate to basically, what trade-off between two very different buckets of ideas, right? Exactly the problem that you face at a senior level, right? Or you just ask things that are more sort of relevant. For example, I would ask something like, should MakeMyTrip build a light app now, right? Maybe it was relevant in whatever 2013, 14. Should we do it even today, right? And see how good the understanding of the candidate is about the macro environment, right? Is he really thinking about the users? Is he really thinking where the next wave of growth for MakeMyTrip could potentially come from, right? Is he able to take user problems and link it to MakeMyTrip's business goals, right? That's the kind of assessment I do in an interview. Or don't like asking soft leadership questions, right? Give me an instance where you had to manage a conflict, right? I try and assess this through the kind of answers that the user gives to some of these questions that I ask, right? Because when you're doing product execution, when you're thinking about product strategy, there is a lot of conflict within your mind as well, and within the broader organization also, how you brought your stakeholders along, right? So I use those questions to basically assess this indirectly and not through a direct question like, tell me about a scenario where you had to lead a team and you had to step up. I don't like asking those kinds of questions.
Got it. And I think, you bring in a very important point that I also personally seen in a lot of interviews is that people jump to conclusions pretty quickly rather than assessing what the problem is. And as you said, right, like diving deeper into the problem as to, and, I think one of the comments also came that, yes, they've also, experienced that you straight away jump into the feature without understanding what the interviewer is really asking for. But yeah, they're really nice insights, Anurag, that you mentioned, right? And so I think folks here and folks who will be viewing this later on should definitely keep it in their mind while they're going for their interviews and preparing their CVs. One thing that I see, Anurag, is that majority of the candidates now who are interested into joining into product management are people who do not really have a tech background as such. They might have not pursued an engineering degree, or they might have not worked as a developer or in the product space even. But they have this question that, like they feel that they're at a disadvantage somehow, which I feel is a myth that, one should not feel that they're. And they also feel that, what they're sort of clueless on what they can do to get the required shortlists or get these interview calls without having to show anything related to product in the past. So for those candidates, what would be your suggestion, and how can they work on their profile?
Right. So if the candidate is from an unconventional background, right, or let's say has not worked in the tech industry, I still feel that tech is not a baggage. Tech is not a problem, right? Tech is only a means to solving the customer problems, right? So eventually what you have to be really, really good at is solving customer problems. Now, if you don't have formal experience in the industry, right, maybe at least today, in my mind, at least there is no excuse, right? There are a plethora of tools available, right? Uh, just maybe, right, you don't really need to know tech at a programming level or a coding level, but you need to understand what it takes to ship a product, right, or build a product, right? Use a no-code tool, maybe use a website builder, right? Maybe build just your own personal website, right? What is stopping you? At least do something, right? And that process will learn a lot, right? Just shipping your personal website will tell you, okay, there is a 3-column layout that you there's a trade-off between a 3-column layout and a 2-column layout, right? This is how you sort of align images. This is how you align content, right? This is how you make your website responsive on different devices, right? Maybe this is how you track data on your personal website, maybe put in an analytics code, right? The JavaScript code, right? Just even doing the simplest of exercises helps you, right? It sort of tells you how the guts of a product are made, and then you are also trying to solve a customer facing problem, right? Like, how do I make my personal website that actually appeals to someone who lands on my website, right? And that kind of triggers that thought process in your mind that probably attending yes, structured courses are great, and probably you should get a structured course to understand the lay of the land. But end of the day, there is no sort of shortcut. You have to ship something. No one have. I'm not saying that you have to sort of write the write the code or guts of the product yourself. Maybe pair up with a developer friend of yours, right? But build something, right? Or use a no-code tool, right? There are like such good no-code tools available. In my mind, there's no excuse right now, right? So ultimately, like I said, right, what I'm looking for is basically initiative and drive. If you can do that, it will give you a lot of perspective. And if you cannot go down the path of at least shipping out something, shipping out a functioning product, at least ship a damn wireframe, right? At least ship a prototype, ship a wireframe, right? When you're applying to an organization, maybe with your resume, you ship a wireframe made in balsamic, right? And hopefully, you can basically get that wireframe to the hiring manager. I'm telling you, how the hiring manager would be super impressed, right? That you are basically coming up with ideas as to how they can improve their current product. And not only you are coming up with ideas, you have actually given them a wireframe that you feel will work. You have put in that word, you have shown that initiative, and that is how you basically catch the eye of the hiring manager or catch the eye of the recruiter, right? It is not just that I will keep spraying my resume across so many different sort of companies and pray and hope that one day I sort of land my dream role, right? You have to do something about it. That's how I feel it should be done.
Got it. And I think, very valid points, Anurag. I think it is like, even if, you cannot let it be a shortcoming, as you said, right? You have to do something about it. And you probably show it with something tangible that either you have built, you shipped, even prototyped, completely. And as you in the middle mentioned, around upskilling. So I wanted to ask that, what are the some ways that people can upskill themselves in the PM role? Like, before, the people who do not have context about product management and they want a structured upskilling avenues, what would be some of the avenues that you would recommend?
I think so. Three parts, right? First part is if you're absolutely new to the product role and trying to understand what a product role entails, right? Maybe they're like, thankfully, there are good solid boot camps around, right? These days, there are a lot of good programs, right? Maybe just enroll yourself in one of these structured programs and try and understand the lay of the land, right? Just what really is the role of a product manager, right? What kind of things he does on a daily basis, what kind of hard skills are required, what kind of soft skills are required. Step one, right? Step two is then, like I said, building and shipping something on your own. Hopefully the program maybe covers some of it, and beyond that also you should take the initiative to basically build out something, right? And that will just give you the kind of confidence that no amount of rote learning is ever going to give you, right? So ultimately what we are looking for is not just skills, but also that self-confidence that, yes, I understand this thing, right? And the third part of it is actually truly understanding sort of the macro picture, the industry, the specific problems that is specific that an organization is grappling with. And that comes by reaching out to folks at your, let's say, target companies or industries which you are curious about, right? And then pick their brains and understand, maybe uh, cold call them or whatever, reach out to them over LinkedIn, right? Try and grab a coffee with them and try and understand exactly the nature of problems that those organizations are facing, what they're trying to, how they're trying to solve them, right? How this helps is when you actually, it kind of gives you a conduit, a way to sort of get your resume through the door, right? Through that guy, right? The other way it helps you is you actually you actually understand what is truly relevant at that organization at that point of time, right? So you can basically tailor your resume according to the requirements of the job or according to the requirements of the organization, right? And you get that extra 1% sort of advantage which the other candidates don't have, right? Or maybe extra 2%, right? And in India, the game is about percentages, right? Unfortunately, for any sort of high quality job out there, you have 200, 300 resumes coming in, right? Out of that, even if, let's say, 20% resumes are good quality, you still have 40 resumes to sort of go through, right? And then So you want to make it first to that list of 40 resumes, right? And
Yeah.
eventually want to be the last man standing in some sense, right? So
Right.
all these 1%ers sort of matter, right? So that is how you should go.
Fantastic. And we at Seekamentor also, for folks who are seeing this, we provide a product management cohort program as well. It is a 12-week program that runs covers 8 modules across all PM concepts, and along with that, as I completely agree with Anurag mentioned, that there should be hands-on learning as well. So we also help you build your product portfolio, working on capstone projects, and provide you with 1 year of placement support. The link in the chat, you can check it out later on in case you feel that you need help with upskilling. But yeah, I think I completely agree that in addition to one of these concepts or classrooms that you learn, you need to sort of implement them hands-on, and then sort of connect, network with people to understand how they're recruiting, what are their openings like, and how do you tailor your CV post that. So completely agreed, and I hope people aspiring here are definitely taking notes. um, the next question I had for you, Anurag, was that mostly PM interviews are structured in a particular way where there are a lot of PM cases involved and a lot of critical thinking involved. But could you help us understand in general that um, what can candidates expect in an interview process? Like, how does the interview process generally go through, and what are the various rounds or skills that they can be evaluated on?
Yeah. So Sahil, I think you know the drill already, right? So typically, at least for entry level candidates and even for mid senior level, I think typically the first rounds is a product design round, right? Just want to see how sharp the user is. See, given the comfort that what you let the candidate talk about something that he launched in his prior product sprint, everyone is very comfortable talking about it. Even there also have certain problems. Most of the guys just keep on rambling and they don't really sort of follow that framework that what here was the problem statement, why this problem was really, really important for the organization. These were the multiple different solutions that were probably possible, and this is the solution I sort of chose, right? Even that doesn't happen, right? The candidate just goes on a complete monologue, right? And at the end of it, at least it happens to me a lot of times where I actually have to actively interject to actually keep pushing the candidate to sort of give me good reasonable insights rather than just explain to me the process, right? So that's there. But yeah, broadly, the first real question that I throw at the candidate, and most of the companies do it for entry and mid senior level, is basically a core product design problem. You just keep the candidate in an unfamiliar setting and see how it reacts, right? And that's definitely the first part. If you kind of process that bar, then you sort of keep increasing that bar, right? Then you start asking deep product execution questions, product strategy questions, right? Maybe a product metrics question, right? So different interviewers will cover different sort of aspects. We typically end up doing like at least 3-4 rounds eventually before the final hire, right? So maybe if I cover the product design round, then I'll pass on the baton to my colleague, right, who's probably going to test you on, let's say, product execution or product metrics, right? Maybe someone will throw you a root cause analysis question. A lot of organizations, there's a dedicated engineering fit round as well, as to whether you have at least the basic sort of nous of conversing with the engineer, right? So all of those things. And then the final bit, which a lot of candidates don't take very seriously, is the culture fit round. You have to understand the culture of the organization very, very closely. In fact, early on in my career, even I made that mistake, right? So example, just to give you an example, right? A lot of companies would prioritize customer experience over revenue, right? That's part of their core principles, that if that means taking a hit on the revenue, so be it. I'll still prioritize what is the right thing to do for the customer. But then there are other organizations who would say that, you know what, I would make that trade-off between customer experience and revenue and arrive somewhere in the middle, right? You need to know that nuance. If you go into go into an interview and say that, you know what, this is how I've done it in the past and this is how I will do it again, that guy will say, you know what, you're not doing what what is right for the customer, right? So knowing that nuance is also important. It is hard to get, but if you kind of know what the DNA of the organization is, the culturally how the organization thinks, it does help,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah. So those are typically the rounds, right? At least for entry level, mid senior level. Obviously, at senior levels, there are leadership rounds, right? And maybe we'll end up talking to the chief product officer or the CEO of the company, right? And I don't know what they ask in their rounds, but I'm sure those rounds are intense as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think I remember during our campus placements, there was this one example where Amazon, for example, Amazon have, they have really these core tenets that they
Yeah,
follow. And we were all said that, you should definitely read about them before you're going for the interviews, because a lot of the interview questions that they ask may not directly ask upon these things, but they are sort of in a way to test if you know them, and if is your personality catered to behave that way. So
yeah,
I would definitely, agree that culture fit router is something that, people should definitely pay a lot of attention to and read about how the company's mission, vision, culture is like. And I think a lot of it helps when you're also interacting with some of the people beforehand from the organization. So to sort of, to understand how things
yeah,
work. So yeah, I think I'll come to the second last question, Anurag. One is that, a lot of people face rejections. They've applied for their resumes. They probably do not they've applied to 10, 12, 15 companies. They don't get interview calls, or as the
yeah,
resume does not get shortlisted, or they get out from the interview process pretty early. So
yeah.
what would be your recommendation for these folks to, how do they what next should they do to improve their chances and go back and try the process again?
Yeah. So again, a great question, right? A very practical problem, right? I don't want to sort of give you give theoretical ideas here. I have some practical nuggets that I want to share with this audience. Right, the first thing I think is to just understand the supply demand equation in India. Right, a lot of people just don't get that maths.
Yeah.
For good quality, sort of like I said earlier, also, right? For any good quality sort of role in India, not just product management, right? Be it a tech leadership role, a high quality consulting job at a tier one strategy company, right? Or maybe, investment banking job, or a finance, like a front desk customer finance role, right? The odds are stacked against you. You have to understand that, right? Like for any of those dream roles or high quality roles, one role, 200 resumes, right? Even just within ISB, right? If a good quality sort of role would float in, right, 200 resumes just from the ISB network will come in, right? So
Yeah.
you have to understand that maths, that the maths is like that, right? And then you have to understand that maybe you have to sort of optimize for different things at different stages of your career, right? If early on you are saying that, I will only work for, let's say, a Flipkart or Amazon or a Google, right, and you are not getting the shortlist, I think it is worth understanding that mathematics and worth changing your strategy, right? Thankfully, in India, the product ecosystem is really, really vibrant. There are a lot of good early stage startups. Yes, there is a environment of layoffs and all, but the startups are as hungry for talent as the big companies are, right?
Yeah.
So maybe the right strategy is to sort of cast your net a little wide. I'm not saying just go on and spray and pray, but at least just figure out, right, areas that interest you. Maybe if video is an area that interests you, maybe apply to video conferencing companies, early stage startups who are doing some good work in, let's say, video space, right? Or maybe if let's say crypto is your thing, then maybe apply to early stage startups in the crypto space, right? Just find companies that really ignite your passion, or find space that really ignite your passion, and don't just stick to the tried and tested companies, right? There are only so many out there,
Yeah.
right? Go for Series A startups, Series B startups. Even if, like, what is the fear, right? Even if you get laid off 2 years later, you would still have good work experience to talk about, right? You would have spent 2 years in a fast moving environment. You would have picked up so much stuff that probably you would not probably even get in a large established organization, right? So what's the fear, right? Why worry so much, right? So one thing, right? The second thing, like I already touched upon, is, right, show some initiative, right? When you're applying to early stage startup, those guys are in any case not probably most of the guys want to work for Google, right? So
Yeah.
obviously they are not getting the kind of resumes they are looking for, right? But what they're looking for is a lot of initiative, right? If you're applying to a startup, right, and like I said, right, you with your resume, you also ship a wireframe, right? telling them these are the different ways in which you could potentially improve your product, right? If nothing, you have done customer research and passing on to them certain personas that, you know what, these are certain personas that you're probably already targeting. These are certain areas where there are good pockets of growth, but you're not targeting, right? If you take that initiative, your chances of shortlist will become that much more higher. Just go out there and show some initiative. Just don't look around seeking help without doing anything from your end, right? Right. And then third thing is, everyone knows that, but I don't know, not a whole lot of people put in that effort, right? Build that, like I said, right? Build that network, right? Go speak to people, not just for getting a referral. Just try and pick their brains to understand the problem spaces that they're working on and demonstrate your own sort of thinking capabilities in that discussion. If that works, that guy will be more than happy to basically help you with a referral, right? And once you go in with your referral, your chances of a shortlist becomes that much more higher, right? Ultimately, everyone is looking for a human sponsor, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, these are some of the things that you should definitely do to basically improve your chances of a shortlist. Like, if someone comes to me and says that I have done all of this and yet I'm not getting a shortlist, then maybe there is a more fundamental, deeper problem that we need to look at. But 99% of the people have not even done this basics, right? And so yeah, so that's important, right? Now when it comes to the actual interview, right? So covering the second part of it, right? I think what people don't realize is that interviewing and being good at your job are not exactly the same skill set, right? A lot of people I know, and in fact, I probably was also in the same camp maybe a few years back, right? You might be great at your day job, but that does not necessarily mean that you are going to be great at interviewing and cracking your dream roles at every damn company that you lay your eyes on, right?
Yeah.
There's a certain way. I think people don't realize there's a certain way in which you need to communicate your ideas. There's a certain way in which you need to structure your ideas. There's a certain way. There are cultural nuances, right? For example, when you're interviewing with a European company, you have to speak slow. You, like, Indians tend to speak very fast, right? You have to slow down. You have to make sure that your interviewer is with you at all times, right? You cannot just go on a 30-minute monologue, and at the end of it, 30 minutes, you find that your interviewer is completely tuned out, right?
Yeah.
Indian candidates are always in solutioning mode. They should spend a lot more time trying to understand the contours of the problem. This is something that is not taught in our sort of education system. And maybe I was guilty of it myself in my own career on quite a few occasions, right? But people have to understand this, learn from good sort of mentors, that this is how, given a problem, this is how you approach it. You don't directly jump to a solution straight up, right? You first break down the problem and only then you get to a solution, right? Because these are very hard, unstructured problems. This is not like a calculus problem that there's only one right answer to this, right? So
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think a lot of these tips are really helpful, and I think this should really help for folks who are sort of, still struggling to get into roles, be it CV or interviews. I think these are some of really good helpful tips that they can implement. How do you recommend aspirants stay up to date with latest trends in products or innovations in product management space, and keep abreast with what is happening in the product ecosystem?
So again, the answer in my case would be slightly nuanced. So if you are like an early stage PM aspirant, right, just trying to get a foot through the door, right, I would rather have you, yes, I want you to be naturally sort of passionate about that industry, right? But rather have you focus a lot more on sort of getting your hard skills correct, right? Not just theoretically read through like 20 different trends that are playing out in the market, right? And maybe spend a lot of time binge consuming content on Twitter and LinkedIn, and then basically regurgitating that in an interview setting. I don't want that from you, right? For an early career PM or for someone who's looking to get in, you should focus on the core fundamentals. The fundamentals are not going to change every single day, right? Get good at your number, get very good at your guesstimates, your numbers, get very good at your user-centric skills, get very good at maybe be hands-on with web analytics tools, with SQL, right? That will just set you up for success, A, both in terms of cracking your dream role, and B, once you get in, it will set you up for success to move on to the next level. Once you are at a mid-senior level, right, where you are actually making a whole lot of decisions around which direction we should take, right? And maybe early on, right, if you're truly passionate, obviously you will keep yourself abreast with the latest and greatest. there's a lot of content on the internet, but most of it is noise. And personally, even I write a lot of content on some of these social platforms. Having said that, it's not my favorite place to write content, right? It's just that I'm trying to solve a different problem, right? So, right. So, I think the real thinking comes in when you read long form content, right? When an author writes something in long form, he's forced to be a lot more deliberate. He's forced to sort of break down the problem a lot more sort of in a thoughtful manner, right? In short form content, you can just write whatever and get away with it, right? So like find out good newsletters, right? So for example, Benedict Evans, right, who has a very high quality newsletter going around it. He was the guy who first coined that term, mobile is eating the world, right? So maybe read the Benedict Evans newsletter every week. He basically sends out a newsletter talking about the latest and greatest, right? So I have kind of identified my sources, right, where I get my sort of news, right? I don't go about chasing every damn sort of trend or insight that is floating around on Twitter and LinkedIn. All right. And similarly, I am subscribed to this paid newsletter by Ben Thompson called Strategy, which again is a wonderful sort of newsletter that is more of a sectoral analysis and industry level analysis, not a deep product analysis, but more like an industry level insights, right? Where are the trends going? Where are the users moving, right? Ultimately, you have to move with your users. Recently, I discovered another very good quality newsletter called The Generalist. It's available both on the website as well as a newsletter on Medium. Again, very high quality industry deep dives, right? Plus this, and then obviously, if you're truly passionate about this thing and not just chasing this for like a high paying job, uh, you should actually spend a lot of time trying out new products, right? Trying out new interesting apps, trying out new interesting APIs. Maybe use an API to basically build something simple, right? It does not have to be fancy. Everyone is going around talking about reams and reams about Chat GPT. But if I ask someone that can you integrate Chat GPT and basically just build a simple website that maybe spits out, let's say, a travel itinerary, right? Or spits out something, right? Or have you tried Chat GPT and maybe use GitHub Copilot and basically seen how it helps write templatized code, right? No one has any insights. Everyone is just going around, going around writing stuff around how AI is going to change the world, but they have never experienced that AI themselves, right? So
Yeah.
You have to be a little more nuanced. You cannot just keep going around chasing every damn thing out there.
Right. No, I think very, very good links and very good points on, how people should approach learning. I think we will share some of these names on our YouTube channel once the video is uploaded. So we'll attach the links as Anurag mentioned. But as he said, right, like there are multiple sources that whatever you feel comfortable reading through. So yeah, I think these are very insightful. On your point around guesstimates and practicing hands-on, we have a community on Slack. Seekamentor has a community on Slack. We'll share the link. We practice guesstimates, case questions, product teardowns. We share around some of these concepts, etc., on the channel, and we sort of want to grow it to be a more of a a peer-to-peer learning platform as well, in terms of people from different backgrounds share their learnings and PM sort of experiences. So if you're interested, you can feel free to join that community as well.